Welcome into a brand new edition of the 06010 ESPN Communications Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Feuz, and we're joined by ESPN tennis analyst Rennae Stubbs. Rennae, Wimbledon is here. You're flying out later this week. Give the fans a perspective. You've played there, and now you're broadcasting for this tournament. What does it mean to you, especially?
Well, Wimbledon always sort of holds such a special place in my heart. Growing up as an Australian and getting up at 2 in the morning to watch, McEnroe and Borg and Martina and Chrissy and and Yvonne Goolagong-Cawley, who was somebody I looked up to as a young kid. And so it just, when you see those beautiful grass courts, when you see the no sponsorship, it's just the gorgeous ivy rolling up the walls. And then when you get an opportunity to actually go there in person, it's like a fairy tale comes to life. And now clearly, having a little bit of success there myself as a player, and then now going in as a broadcaster, it's just, I never get tired of walking through the gates at Wimbledon, ever.
Now, let me run through some of your achievements. Grand Slam victories, four women's doubles, the 2000 Australian Open, and then obviously your Wimbledon in 2001 and US Open, and then 2004 Wimbledon again. When you hear those achievements, you've accomplished a lot in your playing career and now your broadcasting career. What moment do you think defines your legacy?
Oh wow. I think I think when you look back on your own career, you sort of like you're so thankful that you had an opportunity to do it for a living. First of all, as a young girl growing up, you don't really think about, can I make a career of this? Can I buy a house with this? Can I do raise families with this? I mean, people just sort of don't think that way when they're 15, 16. They just want to play the sport that they love. And then to have in a moment where the night before I won my first Wimbledon, I had already won a Grand Slam at the Australian Open, which to me is probably my highlight, just doing it in front of friends and family, and a really intense match, which always means a little bit more against two great players. But then I remember so vividly, even like the night before I won my first Wimbledon title with Lisa Raymond, we sort of said to each other the night before, wow, we could be Wimbledon champions tomorrow. And those are just things that you grow up imagining and hoping for would happen. And you could always say that you won something at Wimbledon. But the fact that I got to do it not only once, but twice was pretty special. And so I'd say those Australian Open and Wimbledon were highlights to me. And, winning a mixed doubles Grand Slam with Todd Woodbridge, who's one of my lifelong childhood friends. It's about relationships. And then the fact that you get to do it with some of your closest friends and achieve some of the greatest things that you could have imagined as a child is pretty special.
You said the night before there's a chance you might win, and then you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's that feeling like?
Yeah, it was great for us too because Lisa and I at the time weren't working with a coach. We'd sort of moved away from a coach that we'd been working with a little bit, and we kind of put it on each other. We would say to each other, I think you need to get better at this, and you need to get better at that, and we really held each other accountable. So it really was something special for the two of us to have achieved that together. And then the irony of when you do come into the tennis world and you don't have a lot of money and you're not this phenom making tons of money, you have to grind your way on tour. And, a small little anecdote to me winning and us winning our first Wimbledon title was that we had our family that put us up in housing because we had no money back in the day in Birmingham. And instead of having a coach and the usual entourages and all that sort of stuff, Lisa and I had our family from Birmingham in our players box. And so those little like moments mean so much because it's like this is a family that sort of basically took us in and provided food for us and shelter and the whole thing. And then like 10 years later, they're sitting there watching us win a Wimbledon title as people from England. Like those little things are kind of very meaningful to me.
When did you think that you could make it in tennis? Like, when did you realize you were going to be not just good, but great?
I think, when I started winning tournaments, multiple tournaments a year, I thought I can do this for a living. I can make a decent living doing this. And clearly, when I started playing with Lisa Raymond, that was like a 6 year. Just constantly winning tournaments. We won like 33 doubles titles together. We won three majors. I think when you start getting successful in doubles anyway, a successful partnership that you feel really good about, and you know that sort of the limit to your capacity as a team is winning Grand Slams, and being quite dominant number one team in the world for a number of years. That I just felt like I was going to be able to make that living and then, hopefully successfully move into a career after that.
Now, you mentioned obviously you won the two women's doubles champs at Wimbledon. How does your experience as a top Grand Slam winner impact your approach when calling a game or match?
For me, I was a very emotional player, so I can tap into people's emotions really easily and I can see it really easily. So I can see when someone is really, I mean, I don't know for a fact they're, this way or that way, but I get an inkling that maybe they're a little nervous, or maybe that was a shot that they missed and just their body movement, showed me that they were a little bit anxious in moments. So I remember what it was like to feel that way on the court. And I do try and not, you know, not know exactly what's going on with somebody, but I can read it and see it probably better than a lot of others. And one of my strengths as a player was I was really good with tactics. I could see some of them, the way that they took their racket back. I could tell that they could only hit this type of a shot. I could see that, they were struggling with being able to hit that ball down the line or whatever it was. That was my strength. And that's what I took advantage of when I played. It was kind of like being a chess player. I was always a move ahead with my strategy. And that made me very good at what I did, especially in doubles where you have to know the way and the angles of where people can hit the ball. And I moved a lot at the net, and I was a serve and volleyer, and all the little things that you have to know tactically, I was very good at. And I think that transferred into me being a good analyst, because not only do I see the angles and see the way someone hits the ball, I also I feel like I can feel their emotions a little bit more than most, because I was a tremendously emotional person. So I think those two coupled together, I love the nuances of commentating tennis matches. I love the strategy that's going on. And for me, that's kind of like a game that I played. So to talk about it now is a lot of fun for me. And I love educating people watching that don't clearly know as much as, I do, or us as former professionals. So when I'm talking to the layman who's a tennis fan that don't really know the little nuances inside and out of what happens and why, I love educating people on those things.
Obviously, it's tough to go from a player to transition to broadcast, but you do have a great handle on that. Was it right away that you had those instincts of where you could describe a player that you could see they might be nervous, or your antidotes that you mentioned, and communicate it in a way for a person, like you said, that might not be involved in the intricacies of tennis? How did you get good at that?
Look, some of us are better at it than others. And that's just the same. It's somebody had much better forehand than me, but I could see things a little bit better than them. So everyone had their strengths and weaknesses. Mine was being able to look at a player, or look at a strategy and be able to implement it, because I understood and I could see what works and what didn't work, and what someone could do and what they couldn't do. And then the emotional side of it is, because I was emotional, I could tap into that. And I think that that comes a little bit naturally. I think you can get better at being an analyst, that you can learn from listening to others, but I think you're either really good at it, or you're okay at it, or you're not good at it. Like it's just like playing tennis. Like I was a great doubles player. I was a good singles player. But I know the difference between a great singles player and me, for example. So I just, as an analyst, I am very 3D. I look at things a lot more with layers, and I love to make a cake with it and be able to show people at home, this is the layer that you've got to make. This is where it gets interesting. Here's the matchup, and here's why. Like I could go on for hours about the matchup with Coco Gauff and Sabalenka, for example, at the French Open, and why things happened. And it's, to me, very clear. To others, they don't see it at all. And so I think that's my little bit of my strength as an analyst, is that I really like to layer the cake, and I see most of the cake.
When you were playing, how did you stay mentally tough on the court during the high pressure moments?
Well, that was something I learned. I think me being able to see something was a strength. Me being able to pick apart a tactic was a strength. My emotions were not a strength for me. They were a disadvantage in many, many ways. I would get upset. I would get quite demonstrative on court, and I had to learn that behavior. And a lot of players have to learn that behavior. Some come in very naturally, very cool, calm, and collected. I think about someone like a Steffi Graf or a Chris Evert. They're very methodical and not robot-like. I don't like to say that, but they're very focused. And then you've got, Martina Navratilova, who was very emotional, and Serena, very emotional. I was very emotional. And I think for me, I had to learn how to, you know, stop, calm down, be a little bit more composed, not be so hard on myself outwardly. Internally, everyone's sort of having their own war, but I was outwardly and internally having my own war. So I had to learn that. That is something that you can't. Some people never learn it. They never learn it, and they don't have the career that they should have had. I'm really lucky that I did learn it at some point, but I was older. I had matured, and I realized that's not the way to win, and this is the only way to win.
Yeah. When you who do you think, when you're looking at this year's Wimbledon, who do you think has the best chance on the grass, men's and women's?
Well, look, I think that the obvious answer for the men's, I'll start with that first, is Carlos Alcaraz. He's a two-time champion. He just won another title on grass in Queens. The guy is just a phenomenal, phenomenal tennis player. His joy for the game is outstanding. It's what gets him through so many tough matches. It's literally what won him the French Open, was the fact that he got the crowd engaged and he was having fun out there, even though he was getting crushed for 2 sets and a bit. And so I think his ability to play on natural surfaces is so prevalent and obvious. The fact that he can play on clay and grass, which are completely different surfaces, but the fact that they're a natural surface shows and showcases his variety of shot, his movement on those surfaces. And I think that his creativity on clay is as important on grass. And so his creativity is actually what wins him a lot of matches on natural surfaces. So I think he's the overwhelming favorite again to win at Wimbledon. I think Yannick Sinner will do better than we've seen him do on grass this year. He lost early in a lead-up tournament, but a very different grass to what he's going to play on at Wimbledon, which is a lot harder. But look, you can't count out Novak Djokovic as well. I have a feeling this is going to be his last Wimbledon. I think it's pretty much clear that he's played his last French Open, and I think he's probably going to play maybe to the Australian Open next year and then call it a day. I don't know that for a fact, but he's certainly alluding to it in press. So I think Yannick, Carlos, and of course Novak are going to be right there at the end. I think Carlos is the favorite to win the tournament again, 3-time champion possible, which would be a remarkable effort. And on the women's side, look, it's a little bit of like balls in the air again. Like there's so many players that can win the tournament. We just saw a great Marketa Vondrousova, who won the tournament 2 years ago, just come back from severe injuries over the last 2 years. It's one of the great stories going into Wimbledon. Her winning in Germany was unreal. So happy to see her win a tournament. Do I think she's going to win Wimbledon again? I don't think so, but certainly it's nice to see her back there. And Barbara Krejcikova, who won last year, another surprise win. She's back from injury. So hopefully those two can go deep in the tournament, because it's nice to see former champions doing well. But, you have to put your money on Sabalenka, who's not even gotten to a final of Wimbledon. She had never gotten to the final of the French. Is this the time again that she'll get to the finals of Wimbledon? Certainly have to put her up there. And, I think Rybakina might be a little bit of a surprise. Of course, she won the tournament a few years ago as well. So her big serve, her big game lends itself to playing on grass. I think Jasper Gull is going to have a decent tournament. She hasn't had a great year, but I think playing on grass, it really suits her. She was very close to winning or being in the finals a couple of years ago, where she lost to Vondrousova up 4-1 in the third, and that was major disappointment for her. But, Maddie Keys as well. Like the women's is so open again. I don't think Iga Swiatek's going to be somebody that's going to be in the finals. Who's just not really comfortable on grass. But Maddie Keys, Rybakina, Sabalenka, certainly would put those guys in a category. Mira Andreeva, what can she do on the grass? So there's no clear favorite in the women's, not at all. Because even if you talk about Sabalenka, who's had an amazing year, she's not even gotten to the finals of Wimbledon. So she has gotten to the semis and got very close and lost a tough one in that semi-final. So you have to think that Sabalenka is probably the favorite, but no odds on massive favorite, in my opinion.
Rennae, before we get to the Fast Five round, I do have to ask you about Serena Williams. Obviously, you were a longtime friend of her, and she even said Rennae Stubbs is the most giving, loving, patient, and understanding person. Her wisdom and kindness exceeds tennis. She is a once-in-a-lifetime individual. You coached Serena during one of her most talked about moments in recent tennis history. What was that experience like working for you working with Serena?
Look, it was an incredible a couple of weeks, really. Yes, we've been friends since she was like literally. I've known Serena since she was 10 years of age when I hit tennis balls with her. Then she was just a kid and a nobody at that point, you know. And so it was, you know, I mean, I guess the word that comes to mind when I think about that moment at the US Open is what an honor it was to be a part of her team, to be a part of that moment in a way that was so pivotal and so, you know, for her important. I wanted to make a difference. It was a reason why I said, you know, sort of reached out to her and said, I'd like to help if you want to hear it. And we'd always talked a little bit about her tennis through the years, whether it be on text or in person when I'd see her in the hallway or, you know, see her out and about, and we would chat about her tennis. And she always listened to what I had to say. She always respected my opinion, which I always thought was so great. But it also shows her greatness. And this is what I tell people all the time about Serena. It's like, or any great, to be frank. I think if you want to be great, you have to be willing to be curious and you have to be willing to learn. And it doesn't mean that the person has to be a better something than you, right? Clearly, I was never the tennis player that Serena Williams was. I didn't have remotely the career that Serena Williams had. But Serena respected me and my tennis brain. And when I would say something to her, she always listened, no matter what. And, you know, some people are like, well, why would Serena Williams listen to you? She had a much better career than you. Because Serena also respected me as a tennis mind and as a friend and trusted friend. And so those, you know, weeks leading up to the US Open were amazing, of being able to get through to her and, you know, guide her in a way that made her feel positive going into the US Open. And then we saw what happened. I mean, look, she's going to win the tournament, but she certainly gave it a good go there for a few matches. And she hadn't had a win in a long time. So for me, just to watch it was an honor to be a part of that. I don't know if you're in the stadium, but to be a part of that noise and that, I mean, it was just, I don't think we'll ever see anything like that at the US Open as far as support for a player goes. So to be a part of it as a team and a trusted, you know, coach for her was pretty awesome.
That's amazing. Rennae, this is my favorite part of any interview I do. It's the Feuz Fast Five. It's 5 quick questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
If you could host a podcast, well, you do host a podcast, but if you could choose anyone in your phone contacts, who are you choosing and why?
Who am I choosing it to do it with? Or
Yes.
Oh, Chelsea Handler. Oh, I'd love to do a podcast with Chelsea. I think it would be constant laughter. I think that she would definitely put me on the spot with a lot of stuff. But I'd love to do a pod with Chelsea. She's a friend of mine, and it would be a blast.
Yeah, I would listen to it every time. Did you have a pre-match superstition?
Usually, like all tennis players, use the same bathroom. Definitely use the same shower. I remember specifically doing that at Wimbledon, and there'd be 8 showers available, and my shower was the one I wanted to get in, and someone was using it. I was like, I got to get in that shower. I got to use the same toilet. Like, we are so psychotic when it comes to little things like that. So that is definitely it. But I think you're talking more about stretching and all that sort of stuff. For me, it was like, all right, I'm just ready to go now. I've gotten the right bathroom. I'm good.
Go-to karaoke song.
Oh, any Whitney Houston song, like Let's Go, or I would have to say Journey, Can't Stop Believing. That's my go-to.
I love it. Dream mixed double partner, any era.
Oh God, that's a good one. I did ask him one time actually in the tunnel at Wimbledon, but I walked by Roger Federer and I said, Rog, you want to play Wimbledon mix this year? And he laughed at me, and he gave me a thumbs down, which was sad, but in a good way, in a nice way. But Roger Federer, oh my God, I would have loved to have played mixed doubles with him.
That's awesome. And then the last one, best player you ever faced.
Oh, wow. The best player I ever played against in singles was Steffi Graf. I played Lindsay Davenport. I played a lot of great singles players. But Steffi, who was a friend of mine, and I almost beat her. It was on grass in Birmingham, which was my favorite surface. And I almost got a win against her. It was 7-5 and third. So that was definitely the greatest moment for me in singles, was playing against Steffi. And then I would say arguably playing against Martina Navratilova for the first time for me was just like a dream come true. And I remember looking down the other end of the court when I went to serve to her for the first time, because I'd looked up to her for so many years. And I thought, oh my God, I'm serving to Martina Navratilova. It was crazy. Mentally, it was crazy. And I lost. Not a surprise. So that's it.
Wow, Rennae, this was so much fun. Thanks so much. This is your busiest time of year, so I really do appreciate the time this morning. Enjoy Wimbledon, and I can't wait to watch it all on ESPN.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me, Alex.